have a conversation about Nairobi and the safety of buildings in this city of Nairobi. We are joined by a special elect MCA in the County Assembly of Nairobi, Nasra Nanda. Good morning, Mheshimiwa.
Good morning.
Welcome to the hot seat of the Situation Room.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Happy Monday.
Thanks.
Did you have a good weekend?
It was a short weekend.
Why?
Because there's a lot to do.
Really?
Yes.
You do many things on weekends. Weekends are meant for you to rest.
Well noted. I'll take that advice going forward.
Yeah. Now, we're going to have a conversation about the safety of Nairobi. And the question we are asking is, as these things are happening in this city, do we have a county assembly in this city? Oh, yes, we do. You're one of them. You'll tell us what you have been doing in that assembly. But City will welcome you with the day's proverb. Every week he goes to one African country, brings us proverbs from that country. This is a new week.
It's a new week.
New set of proverbs.
New set of proverbs.
New country.
New country.
Which one?
Malawi. Yes. Malawi has a president.
He's saying that Malawi was previously called Nyashland.
Okay.
Yes.
Starting with a scandalous way on Monday. Yes.
It's Nyasa.
Sa.
Okay.
Land.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. The president is somebody who is not unfamiliar with the country of Kenya.
Mm-hmm.
He has spent a number of years in this very, very country.
Mm-hmm.
He is called Lazarus Chakwera.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. He has a vice president called Saulos Chilima.
Mm-hmm.
They have a house speaker. These people are gender sensitive, called Catherine Gotani Hara.
Mm-hmm.
They have a chief justice. Because the name, I can't determine the gender, but the name of the chief justice is Rizane Mzikamanda.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, they have a national assembly. Yes. That's what they have.
Okay.
And their government is what you refer to as a unitary presidential republic. Okay? But then whenever you hear president, vice president,
And no prime minister.
forget prime minister, or even deputy president, that is a unitary
Presidential.
presidential. Yes. President is mambo yote, as we say in Kiswahili.
Okay.
Yes.
He's everything.
Kabisa.
And I know Dr. Chakwera will speak like this. He's a preacher.
Oh, yes, he is.
He lived in Buruburu for a number of years.
Taught there even, I'm told.
Ah.
Yes.
Okay.
So, when we say Kenyan inchi ajabu, it is with good reason.
Yeah.
Yes, which means we should be on very good terms with that country.
And the German tattoos are 58.
And the German are 58.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, the proverb?
Okay. White teeth are... No. Let me just repeat
Start.
the proverb.
Okay.
White teeth are no guarantee against bad breath.
White teeth are no guarantee against bad breath. Mheshimiwa Nanda, what do you make of this proverb? What's the interpretation of it?
You were not kidding when you said hot seat. So I'll start by saying that what appears to be good, or what is packaged well, might not necessarily be the reality on ground, which could be the exact opposite.
You put it well.
Thank you.
What you see is not necessarily what you get.
No. There's no guarantee. Remember, all that glitters and all that, we said it earlier on. So, yes. And the book, the cover, and judging it and all that also.
And all those kind of things.
Yes.
Yeah. What you look at and what you see. Be careful, my friend.
Be very, very careful.
It could just be luring you.
Yes. Like this swanking new building that looks like it's all set to be inhabited. Lo and behold, it rains just a little bit.
Kumbe, it's just
And then it
built on shaky ground.
Yes, kabisa.
Earlier last week, the Nairobi Governor Johnson Sakaja had ordered an audit of all buildings constructed in the city over the last 2 years. In those new directives, Sakaja said the audit follows feedback that his administration has been receiving from stakeholders within the built environment sector. The governor also temporarily suspended the issuance of new building plan approvals and excavations in ongoing construction sites. He said, "We have also suspended undertaking of excavations at construction sites. This would compromise the structural integrity and safety of adjoining buildings due to the ongoing heavy rains. An audit has been ordered. The audit will begin on the 13th of May, and that is today. Now, as those questions start emerging from Nairobi, people start asking, but then this is the executive which is getting feedback. People have been complaining on social media. People have written to the executive. People have written to the county, and they are taking action. We also elected MCAs, and we have MCAs in that assembly. What have they been doing? And you're one of them, Nasra. And we find out that, hiya, kumbe, you had actually taken some initiative some time back. Give us a background of this.
Firstly, I think the issue of collapsed buildings has plagued a lot of parts in Kenya, but Nairobi is of particular interest because it's the capital city. It needs to lead by example in the right way.
Yeah.
And so in 2022, October, when we were fresh, if you like, it was a prevalent issue at the time. And we were seeing a lot of buildings collapse. And I moved a motion seeking, as a start, the audit of residential buildings. And in particular, I was looking at the structural and safety issues. The Assembly passed the motion, and we agreed as an Assembly by resolution that now this is something the executive need to pursue as a matter of urgency. And that was all the way in November 2022. We have tried following up on the status of the same. That information, to date, we hadn't received. And so, in as much as the governor made the pronouncement around the audit, which I welcome, by the way, I'm just a bit concerned that it took so long for this pronouncement to be made following that resolution by the county assembly. However, because I'm not one to sensationalize, I want to stick to fact, I think it's important to say better late than never. But I hope that it is not a pronouncement, it's actually going to be implementation. And I think the second thing, which is important, is we need to understand this audit that, they're claiming that they want to undertake. If the approval process and everything that had to do with the bad was done by the executive, my concern is how will they be the same people to fix the problem? I just have that concern. So as an assembly, we noted that there was a lot of, if you like, concern by the public that, there's beacon-to-beacon buildings, public participation issues are not complied with. And so with that then in mind, we set up a subcommittee to essentially review the approvals, change of use, and a number of things from the time we were sworn in to date. So aside from moving motions, which are things we've done, now this is something we're actively trying to do so that we can have visibility of what's going on.
Of what's happening in the county.
Yes.
I want to ask first, when a motion is moved by a member of the assembly, and the assembly agrees with that motion and comes up with a resolution, what exactly is a resolution legally? Basically,
you as a whole assembly have agreed to back that this is something important that needs to be implemented. So you direct, because for us, our part is legislation. Our part is oversight, our part is representation and giving expertise on what needs to be highlighted. So we, on those fronts, agreed that this is important. We agreed that this is something that needs to be implemented. So we send that directive that this now needs to be implemented. And so that's why I said 2022, and now this declaration, it's taken a bit of time.
Is it binding on the executive? When the assembly passes a resolution and says, we, the assembly, resolve that this important needs to be done, is it binding? Does it go to the executive as a suggestion or as an instruction?
It's an instruction. But now I think where perhaps there's a gap is on the implementation. So you've issued this directive. This is what you need to do. But now the follow-through is where I think we need to get much stronger in ensuring that is done.
Is it open-ended or does it have timelines?
So I think that specific motion did not have a timeline, but I think in hindsight, perhaps what I should have included in my motion is within, 6 months or, because the unfortunate thing with not having the timeline is, I could take 10 years to action it, but you've not put a timeline on me, right? So I think in hindsight, that probably would have been something I should have included in that motion. But nonetheless, given that it's an issue of public interest, it needs to be prioritized. Yeah.
Well, nature has come to your aid, hasn't it?
Yes, it has.
Because now suddenly things have been hastened.
Yes.
And things that seem to have been taken to the back burner have now been fast forwarded to the present time. But let me ask the question, if indeed the executive were to act on the precepts that your motion had actually set into being, what would we have expected to see?
I would have expected that this audit may be starting off with a pilot of, let's say, earmark 50 to 100 buildings, to go through that audit to see whether is it a persistent or recurring problem in this, if you like, identified sample of buildings. So that then you could be able to extract what gaps are there in terms of how we are, building these buildings, the approval processes, the structure issues, so that we can then say, after reviewing a sample size of 100 buildings, we've noted the following are the issues we face. I would have expected that. Second, I would have also expected, given the issues we've seen and the shortcomings we've seen, invite now the professionals so that they can say these issues are a result of 1, 2, 3 from an engineer's perspective, architects or whatever.
I want to take you back.
Yeah.
There's a ministry within the county that deals with buildings, structures, and so forth, isn't it?
Yes.
And then there are a specific department that deals with the various facets. Okay. Now, from the time authority is given for someone to actually construct until the time authority is given, I'm assuming it's given, for people to occupy the building, should there not be a checklist of things that ought to have been fulfilled, and that this particular ministry within the county that deals with these things, should they not have given an okay as to the habitability of this particular structure?
No, definitely. There should be a checklist. There should be, if you like, an end-to-end confirmation of this process. What, on our side, we don't have visibility on is whether this is actually done in practice. And that's why the subcommittee was saying we want to see, the applications from the time we've been sworn in to date. Because if that is happening, why do we still have these problems? And that's the information that we wanted.
So the audit was to cover this.
So let me just put it this way. There are currently 2 processes happening. The motion 2 years ago was requesting an audit, which seems to be now what the executive is undertaking. But separately for us, as a subcommittee in the assembly, we noted several concerns. There's the public participation issue, which people are saying is not being followed to the letter of the law. Then there's the beacon-to-beacon buildings. Then there's the collapsed buildings. So there are a number of issues. So for us, we're not interfering with the fact that the executive is saying audit. We're saying that that's one of the many issues that Nairobians have. So as a subcommittee, we want to know whether all these processes are being followed in compliance with, the law or set procedure, so that we can then identify gaps, if there are any, and then invite stakeholders so that it becomes a holistic process. So just for clarity.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which committee is this?
This is the planning committee in the county assembly.
This is a standing committee, is it?
It's a it's a sectoral committee.
Right.
So the sectoral committee has set up a subcommittee to look into those.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the Committee on Planning is basically the committee that oversights the built environment in the city.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Over the years,
yes,
say now 2 years of this particular assembly's life, has this committee summoned the CEC in charge of planning, the chief officer in charge of planning, the directors in this department to ask questions on what's going on?
Yes.
Do they appear?
Yes, they do appear. But I think in the past, it was, I think, more of a piecemeal approach. So we see a specific problem, we call them to answer.
Okay.
But now that we've identified, it seems there's an issue with the entire planning process that we feel needs to be addressed holistically. That's why we set up this committee, so that we can kind of have that holistic understanding of what's going on.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're a resident of this city,
yes,
and you are actively involved in the built environment,
yes,
issues and concerns and advocacy for this. What do you think is the problem in this city?
I think, on ground, off the top of my head, over time, there's been a shortcut syndrome that it's just the truth. There's a shortcut syndrome that, is plaguing, and not just the built environment, just generally, I feel.
Our society is just shortcuts.
It's starting to appear that, those processes, a lot of Kenyans feel they're too long and they decide, I want things done quicker. But what's also hurting us is that it now has a ripple effect, because as you build, and I'm not saying, all professionals or all Kenyans, of course, but if you start taking shortcuts in the little things, it reflects, because who you are on a day-to-day basis starts spilling over into your work, into processes, and I think that's a real problem. And then I also think, secondly, we also tend to sensationalize things rather than be very factual. And I say this to mean, in this digital era right now, we will be up in arms about an issue. Today, tomorrow, it's all over, getting several likes, clicks. But then, after that, it dies. So yes, in that moment, it seems very important, but we move on. I think the approach needs to change, in that we need to first reward good behavior rather than bad behavior.
Yeah.
And then second, rather than sensationalize things, we need to be fact-based, so that whilst it might not be news grabbing, but are you actually, investigating something that could lead to real solutions?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Our guest this morning is Nasra Nanda. She is a special elect MCA in the County Assembly. People are asking, what is special elect MCA?
Nominated. So you're nominated by the party to bring expertise to the assembly.
I see.
And also you could be nominated by virtue of being an overlooked demographic. So youth, gender, or minority.
Johnson Sakaja has ordered an audit of all building approvals in the city, buildings under construction in the city, and also buildings in the city from today, the 13th of May. And he says this one is just to establish that we are safe. However, it comes to everybody's public attention that in September 2022, September, right? October 2022, the County Assembly of Nairobi had actually passed a resolution asking for an audit of those buildings in Nairobi. It wasn't implemented until you saw the rains, until you saw a building collapse in the other day, and now the issue is back in the public limelight. And this is something that has been happening. There's been these conversations of the kind of buildings that we're seeing in the city. You mentioned them, some of these issues. People are complaining about beacon-to-beacon construction. So you go to the city county assembly, no, not the assembly, the government, seeking approval to put up a building. Is it likely that you can be given approval to actually build on all the corners, touching all the corners of your plot? Is it likely?
No.
So, but we've seen these things happening. We've seen buildings that are more than 5, 6, 7 stories high coming up, and they are beacon to beacon.
No, definitely. That's what we're seeing on ground. And, I think I said this before. For me, it's very important for us not to sensationalize, to be factual. And that's why I'm very keen to receive the requested information from the executive, which is all these applications for approvals, change of use, and surrenders from, the time we've been sworn in September. Only because I don't want to say, is it possible, without having confirmed and reviewed that information, because I'd like to assume that there are professionals in that other side who will ensure we're compliant with the law. If what is happening on ground is a different story, I would like to assume that it is not rubber stamped by those who are tasked to actually comply with the law, at least until we ensure we have that information that we can verify.
All these problems that we seem to talk about, it's not as though we go to sleep and we wake up the following morning and they've occurred. No. They take place incrementally as we watch. And I don't think anyone can be an MCA in Nairobi without necessarily living here, because the people you represent are in the county of Nairobi. So these things that we speak of, they're not alien. No. And also they didn't begin with the life of this particular assembly. No, they've been there. So the danger seems to be an understood continuity of what seems to be, and I'm choosing my words carefully here, what seems not to work for the welfare of the majority of the citizens of this county, but rather for the interest of the few. If you travel outside this country, I'm going to give two examples, Singapore and Malaysia. These tall buildings we speak of are a joke. There you see buildings, you actually get the impression they're touching the clouds. They're really, really, really tall. Okay? So the problem isn't the tall buildings. No. At some level, I don't even think the problem is the issue of zoning. The problem is one is never certain of the simple element of accountability that is required for these things. Because it happens, and when questions are asked, one hears words, one hears promises, but nothing much seems to change. If anything, that which was complained about seemed to be on the increase. So you then have to question and ask, okay, oversight is not the purview of the executive, it's the purview of the assembly. And in this particular assembly, the majority happened to be ODM, who, according to reliable sources, are the people who are in the opposition. Okay?
Yes.
But from everything I see, they seem to be very tightly in bed, cozily, with the administration and the executive of Nairobi County. So how is that oversight then possible?
I think, firstly, it's a good observation that this problem seems to be increasing. That's fact, right? I think over time, people who, as I said before, take shortcuts get bolder because they've been rewarded for their bad behavior, and over time nothing has happened. And one of the things, I've said, even to the governor, is I know you found problems coming in, but you can't say this is what you found. Because people are looking to you to solve these issues you found on your side on implementation. But similarly on oversight, one of the key things we need to do is we need to give Nairobi the city that they want, which is a city of dignity and where things work, actually work. So perhaps the brand of politics is different this time at the assembly in that we are not sensationalizing issues, but I want to assure Nairobians that we are actively trying to ensure we have facts so that when we do present a case, it is not because we are after or it's a witch hunt. It's a genuine case backed by information we have and actual processes which have been compromised or otherwise. We asked for documents and we are asking for information because if we start a witch hunt and say things are not working, and then documents say otherwise, even Nairobians would lose respect for the integrity of the assembly. So it's slightly slower because of that.
But Mheshimiwa,
Yes.
the issues we speak of
Yes.
are not ecclesiastical. They
Yeah.
are not spiritual.
Yeah.
Okay? They are very mundane, see, touch, feel things. That's what a building is. So, I mean, you can't be witch hunting if, say, the documentation says this, but we have the evidence of the building. The documents are supposed to be the documentation of what we're supposed to see in the form of a building. So if the documents say this and the building says something else, because the building will tell us its own story.
Definitely. No, and I agree with you.
Yes.
But what we're saying is, we're seeing that, but if you don't have the documents that confirms, and that's now what we're requesting. Because we want to make sure that, as we are pointing out, Eric has said something in Parklands is off. We're not going by what Eric is just saying. We actually want to compare the application or development approval sought versus what's on ground, so that we're actually saying, hey, Bwana CEC, the application was for 6 stores, we are seeing 12.
Right.
If we don't have that document, it will be hearsay. And it could be sensationalized.
That
And
document is available, isn't it?
not all.
It's supposed to be in the public domain, isn't it?
Yes.
Not all. What does that mean?
So the issues that Nairobians are bringing up, we don't have all that information. So that's what we've done. We've asked for this information so that when we do make this presentation and invite Nairobians to come in, we are actually going on a fact-finding mission to confirm so that we can present it in the form of a report. We don't want it to end with verbal spats on camera, but actually don't provide solutions to Nairobi. And I think that's probably maybe the approach that a lot of Kenyans might not be used to. Because it's very easy for me to go on camera and start saying, Haiwak, Sakaja must go, or whatever.
But you have nothing to show.
But I have nothing to show.
How difficult would it be to
Yes.
actually access this information for the assembly and even for member of the public? Every development has a signboard there. It shows approval number, it shows all these details. That means that there's a file in City Hall.
And that's what we've requested for, which
Legally,
has not...
legally, is it information that should not be accessible?
No, it
For
is
any
information.
reason?
It is information that should be accessible, and that's what we've requested. So for us, we don't want to jump the gun and say things are wrong before we get these documents.
Okay.
We do note that there are issues. That's a given. But before we proclaim ourselves as judge, jury, and executioner, we need to be factual based. And I think that's what is key here. Because
How long do you give yourselves before you receive this information?
So we actually gave the CEC Built Environment and his team 2 weeks. And
Beginning when?
it was supposed to be given by May 3rd May, this information.
Okay.
And they let us know that it's somewhere in the assembly, which we confirmed is not in our possession. And we actually let them know that we will be following up this week. So if that information is not there, then it will become an issue. Because on good faith, we let them know is we're not going to interfere with implementation. That's your role. But oversight is our role. So we need to have this information so that we can start doing the review.
So by 10 days ago, they should have provided this information to the
By
assembly.
3rd May?
Yep.
Yeah.
Today is 13th,
Okay.
right? And they said, we have forwarded it to the assembly.
Yes.
But the clerk of the assembly and the other officers in the assembly don't have this information.
No. So that was as per our meeting on Thursday before the holiday. That was what now we were following up on, because that meeting was for us to discuss the next session once we've reviewed this information. And one of the things that came out was they said they've dispatched this information and we're saying we've not received it. So actually right after this, my intention is to go to the assembly to follow up on whether these documents were actually received. Because for us, access to information is critical, because that then allows us to review and oversight.
Doesn't it tell you something when the officers come and tell you, at the end of the time that you've given them, that they've forwarded the information, and yet the information has not arrived?
No, it definitely tells me that there is a problem. But I am optimistic that when I do go today, I will find it. If not, we already let them know that we will do a walk-in to collect this information, because ultimately this is a duty to Nairobians. And I think I would like to assume that there's a lot of good faith in delivering a Nairobi that works, but it needs to be backed by action. If not, then Nairobians can have a valid reason to be, mistrustful, right? But again, it's a very interesting space to be in, because you want to give the benefit of a doubt and you want to be factual, but we also want to see goodwill and good faith, which we expressed as such in the meeting. Yeah.
I think the process that you followed is laudable, because it's a process that one can document and one can see.
Yes.
And it speaks positively about you and the committee that you belong to seeking to follow the rule of law and doing the due diligence required in such matters. Unfortunately, our lived experience when it comes to these matters is that the best that will happen is that it will be prolonged, best. And you may even be given some information which will not actually fulfill the mandate that you yourself required. In the event that we're having this conversation in July, same conversation, and nothing will have happened, what do you think then will be the recourse that you must then follow to ensure that whatever was required to be done is actually done?
At that particular point in time, we would have a number of tools. One is we could move the court once we've highlighted or identified specific examples where things were breached. Second, we would then be able to amp up our role, both in our capacities as MCAs, but in particular also in our capacity as the opposition. Because I think by that time we would have established that there was no goodwill, there's no following of procedure. But until we get there, I would like to say that despite our challenges historically, we need to remember that this is a new government, and I'm trying my best, and we're trying our best to ensure that at all times we're moving with what we know at this time. So at this time, we don't have that information. I'm not going to preempt what will happen in July, but I am going to say that there is recourse in law. There is recourse in different ways for us to ensure that then whoever is responsible for the delays, the non-compliance is held to account. And I think one of the key things that's making us go through this process is because ultimately there's a trust issue that Nairobians have, both with the Assembly and the Executive, by the way.
Yep.
So for us, it's important that we rebuild that trust. It might be a slower process, but it's very, very important to do it the right way.
Some of these things may be beyond the Assembly. I'm going to tell you why I think so. Because it's a problem that comes with these handshakes we have in the country.
Yeah.
The handshakes in of themselves are wonderful things because they guarantee that we have a peaceful passage from one government to the other and things are not blown out of proportion. We don't have instability. Full stop.
Yes.
Thereafter, there's complicity because you then find that people who are supposed to actually oversee or oversight
the
executive do not. I said it in passing then, I'm repeating it.
Yes.
They then seem to be in bed with the executive.
Yes.
So there will be movement or an attempt at showing that things are being done, but nothing really changes. Not really. Because all these things that we're trying to look at and we're trying to check, at the very heart of it, it's not bad buildings or shortcuts. It's money.
Yes.
Money changing hands. You see, one will say, do you have proof? Yeah, there's ample evidence, not even circumstantial. You just need to have eyes that see and you will be able to see. Because there'll be very many individuals who are in positions of authority whose, if you look at their lifestyle, if you look at how they live, and if you look at what they own or the businesses they purport to have, it cannot possibly explain it. Now, people who are in positions of authority, that is, politicians like yourselves or those who are in the executive, when they are in agreement, again, this is historical, the people who suffer are the very people who put them in those positions. Because once they have an understanding, the very things that are supposed to happen to benefit the citizenry will not happen, because oversight will only occur verbally. You'll hear of people saying this ought to happen. Now, people who are in the sort of position you're in will know with great clarity that some of those things are never going to happen. Not because they can't happen, but people are simply not going to do the things that they ought to do.
And that's a valid point. And I agree with you. A lot of the times in the past, that has compromised a lot of actualization for the people. But I am saying that what is the alternative? Should we then assume there's a handshake and do nothing?
No.
And that's why this process is important. Let us try. Have faith that this subcommittee is going to undertake its oversight role, and have faith that we are genuinely going to try and interrogate what's going on, request the executive to comply, and also give them the opportunity to actually show the goodwill in complying. If it doesn't happen, then we can all either go guns blazing or go back to the point you just made, that potentially the system has held us hostage. But if we take that approach from now, then I might as well not be...
Actually, no.
But you're already seeing the signs.
Yes.
Mheshimiwa.
No, what I'm trying to say...
10 days ago, you should have received documents.
Yes.
Okay, let's even say you go back to the assembly today and you find you received some documents. Like
Yes.
Siti was saying, you're just doing the runaround. So you receive 30% of the documents that you needed, you start reviewing them, then you realize, oh no, these are only 30% of the documentation. Then you write to them again and say, you know what, you did not send us this. They send another 20% of the documents. By July, you are still having this conversation of back and forth. No, the information you sent is not enough. It's not sufficient to what we were asking. Oh, sorry. We thought this is what you wanted. You actually also needed this. Okay, we are sending it to the assembly by tomorrow, because that file right now is being worked on. You see, there's an ongoing audit as well, and those other auditors are looking at the same file. So you can see the signs that this goodwill we're talking about is just goodwill by word, not goodwill by deed.
Let's talk in July, and then we'll confirm whether it's goodwill by word or goodwill by deed. As I said, for me, I don't want us to be in a position where we've given up.
No, we shouldn't. But we should be realistic to the demon and the dragon that we're dealing with.
Oh, no, for sure. But I think the problem, or rather the good thing and the bad thing about being in opposition is, if I were to start talking right now, it could damage the very thing that we're trying to accomplish. If we sensationalize it and it takes away from the actual issues. Because as I said, that's my only concern.
Mheshimiwa, I like your approach. It is a good approach.
Thank you.
It is an extremely good approach because it's methodical, it is steady. One can see step by step. But and why I'm saying I like it, in following it, you will also be able to document the pitfalls and the issues that will most certainly come your way and will most certainly seek to hinder the progress that you're going to make. Any process that seems to be perpetually wrong is not perpetually wrong. It is being made to be perpetually wrong. There are always human beings involved. And in this lovely country of ours, Kenya, when such things happen and the continuity is what it is, there is always money involved. Always.
There's another reality that we must contend with.
Yes.
And like you said, even the governor himself has been here and he has said, you know what, this issue of buildings, approvals and permits and enforcement, it's a perennial problem that's been there for long. Years, when he was in the National Assembly, when he was in the Senate, and now as governor, these are things that you're grappling with. So we have a deep problem when it comes to this. if you look at the construction and the development we're talking about, these are multi-billion shilling developments. This is not something that, just as junior officer in the county executive offices makes a mistake and says, I have given approval.
No.
And then he didn't check. This is not that. This is deeper than that. Can we really, really slay this dragon? Like, truthfully speaking. Because if we can't, then let's find a way of saying, okay, so we need to import mercenaries who have slain dragons in their countries to come and deal with our
Now
dragons.
you see, he's leaning towards that opposition.
Yeah. Look, when you find a building that's come up and it's 10 floors high and the approval was for 7 or the approval was for 4, that is a problem.
Yes.
If you see buildings that are coming up and they're beacon to beacon, that is a problem, and it's a clear, glaring problem. It involves not only the officials who give the authorities in the county government. It also comes to the professionals. There's an architect who drew this thing beacon to beacon. There's an engineer who supervised this thing beacon to beacon. There's a QS who did the math
The
for beacon to
quantities that were
beacon.
required for that building, yes.
There are many people involved in this thing.
And they're all professionals
Yes.
who belong to professional bodies.
And I agree with you. So to answer your question, can we slay the dragon? Honestly, I think because it's such a deep-rooted problem, we can't slay the dragon. What we can start doing realistically is to wound this dragon.
Start bleeding it.
Yes. One stab at a time.
It'll die by itself.
Wow. One stab at a time.
Right.
Why do I say one stab at a time? And you mentioned some critical things. So one stab at a time means stab number 1 is the information that allows us to identify the problems around development, change of use, surrenders. That's one stab. Because then you start to see a pattern. Now this pattern makes you respond, not react. Because the problem with not having facts and then just attacking, you're reacting, you're not responding.
Right.
So that's the first stab. The second is to ensure that we are all operating with a strategy. The executive doing its part and us doing our part and the professionals as well. Yeah.
And the strategy requires information.
Yes.
Okay, we are at the information stage. All right. Nasra Nanda is the special elect MCA in the Nairobi County Assembly. We've been talking about the safety of building and safe and built environment in the city.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.